Subscribe, please. This case takes place in the USA in the year 2025. Recently, a video has been circulating on social media. It shows perhaps one of the most senseless crimes ever caught on camera, leading to people all over the world erupting in anger and frustration, with many pushing for serious retribution. This is the case of Irina Zarutska. Irina was a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee who had fled her homeland amid the chaos of war. She was born and raised in Kiev, Ukraine. She and her family escaped the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and they sought a fresh start in the USA. They settled in Charlotte, North Carolina, hoping that this city would offer the safety and opportunity that had been snatched away from them by the war. Friends described Irina as a vibrant young woman, an artist, and someone full of life and dreams for the future. In the city of Charlotte, Irina embraced her new community. She was known for her warm personality and her creative spirit, and she worked very hard to rebuild her life in the USA. By August of 2025, Irina had been in Charlotte for around 3 years. In that time, she had settled well in the USA, but of course, she still missed her home country. The 22nd of August 2025 began like any other day for Irina. By 9:40 p.m. that night, Irina was on the East-West Boulevard station waiting for the Lynx Blue Line train. Surveillance video would later show her stepping onto the train and taking a seat, presumably looking forward to ending her day. There were other passengers around, just a normal night on public transport. However, unbeknownst to Irina, one of those nearby strangers would soon change all of that. She sat on her seat, scrolling through her phone and gazing out of the window, totally unaware of the man sitting just behind her. This man was already on the train when she boarded. He wore a red hooded sweatshirt and appeared to be in an agitated state in his seat. Witnesses later said that he even appeared to be somewhat emotional. Still, in those first moments, there was no confrontation or even a conversation between Irina and this man. Other riders were scattered throughout the cart, each absorbed in their own world. No warning of what horror was about to unfold. Just moments later, chaos erupted. The man in the red hoodie behind Irina pulled out a folding knife from his pocket. He unfolded the blade and then paused briefly. It looks as if he contemplated for just a second. However, moments later, this man lunged forward, towering over Irina, before plunging the knife into her throat. It all happened in mere seconds. She literally had no time to even react. One moment she was seated, and the next she was being stabbed in a savage, unprovoked attack. Irina collapsed from her seat onto the floor, fatally wounded. Fellow passengers watched in shock, some frozen in fear. The killer then continued to stab Irina a further 3 more times. All of this was captured on CCTV. On the footage, after slashing Irina, the killer is seen just calmly walking away as if nothing had even happened. He didn't run, he didn't panic. In fact, he strolled to the opposite end of the rail car without a single care in the world. In the chaos of the attack, the killer had somehow managed to injure his own hand, so on the CCTV you can see blood visibly pouring from his hand. As the train came to its next stop, the attacker removed his red sweatshirt and held it to his hand, attempting to stop the blood coming from his wound. After the killer left the train, several passengers rushed to assist Irina. One rider ran toward her, attempted to render first aid and comfort as she lay on the floor unresponsive. Others frantically called 911 and began shouting for help. Some passengers fled in the railcar to the next station, running along the platform in fear or in search of police. By 10 p.m, emergency calls had brought police officers and paramedics rushing to the station. They immediately checked on Irina, looking for a pulse and any signs of life. However, tragically, within minutes, paramedics determined that Irina's injuries were catastrophic. Despite their efforts, she had no chance of survival. Irina was pronounced dead at the scene shortly after. Other officers found out on the platform station looking for the attacker described by the witnesses, although they soon realized that the attacker didn't get too far. As the police just began looking for him, they found him still at the station immediately, on the platform where he had just exited from the train. The killer made absolutely no effort to escape, and witnesses on the platform all pointed their fingers towards him to the police. Officers confronted the killer, and he was immediately taken into custody without further incident. Nearby on the ground, police discovered a blooded folding knife, which was swiftly recovered as the suspected murder weapon. The emergency response had been swift. Within roughly 10 minutes of the attack, the perpetrator was detained and the victim pronounced dead. Due to the sheer brutality, a witness had to be transported to hospital for an unrelated medical issue. According to one source, they had suffered a panic attack from what they had seen. The police now had the grim job of informing Irina's family of exactly what had happened and begin the search for why this happened. In the hours that followed, detectives worked to piece together the full story of Irina's murder, and they were able to identify the killer as 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr. That night, crime scene investigators combed the train and platform for evidence. They photographed the scene, collected the knife, and swabbed for DNA. Forensic technicians also documented the blood splatter and any fingerprints on the weapon or nearby surfaces. Every detail was documented. However, the police then received the access to the CCTV footage on the train, and what they saw was one of the most brutal and twisted murders they had ever seen. From the footage, investigators learned that there had been no interaction, no provocation, nothing. Meanwhile, the investigators looked into Brown's actions leading up to the attack. They learned that Brown had boarded the train without paying the fare, and on the train, he reportedly sat alone, talking to himself and displaying erratic behaviour, but nothing he did drew enough attention to alarm others until that moment of violence. The police have not publicly disclosed if Brown said anything during the stabbing or if any words were exchanged at all. Why he chose to attack Irina, a person he didn't know, is a question that he did not answer that night, and perhaps one he can't even fully answer himself. So, just who is DeCarlos Brown Jr.? Well, initial information trickled out within hours. Brown is a 34-year-old male, reportedly homeless with no fixed address. Very soon, it became clear that Brown was not a stranger to law enforcement. In fact, he had a lengthy criminal history spanning well over a decade. Brown's criminal record dated back to at least 2011. Over the years, he has been arrested and convicted for a variety of offences in North Carolina. Among the more serious convictions on his rap sheet were for robbery with a dangerous weapon, breaking and entering, and felony larceny. For those crimes, Brown had served approximately 6 years in prison, finally gaining release in September of 2020. However, freedom did not lead to a reformed life. In the years after his release, Brown had additional run-ins with the law. In September of 2022, he was arrested for attacking a woman, though I couldn't find too much information about actually what happened. Then, in January of 2025, just 8 months before the stabbing, Brown was arrested for an unusual offence: misuse of the 911 system. According to court documents from that January incident, Brown had a mental health episode. He called 911 for a strange reason. He told the responding officers that he believed that someone had given him a man-made material that was now inside his body, controlling when he ate, walked, and talked. This delusional claim strongly suggested that Brown was suffering from some form of mental illness or psychosis. In fact, it later emerged that Brown had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Family members, including Brown's own mother, would later say that he had long struggled with his mental health, and they had even tried to get him help. The January 2025 arrest for the 911 misuse call led to Brown appearing in court, and by July of 2025, a public defender questioned his competency to stand trial. A judge even agreed that Brown's mental health was in doubt and ordered a forensic psychiatrist evaluation in that case. However, frustratingly, that evaluation had not yet occurred by the time the 22nd rolled around. Brown was effectively out on the streets awaiting a mental health assessment, despite him having clear signs of delusions and a history of violence. One would think that this combination alone would be enough to have him sectioned and treated. In hindsight, it's a devastating fact that had Brown received the treatment or the intervention his family sought, he likely wouldn't have been on that train, and an innocent woman wouldn't be dead. The police also concluded that Brown had no known connection to Irina before the attack. There was no shared history, no interaction on social media, nothing. As of right now, the motive remains elusive. Some speculate that Brown's mental health may have driven him to violence, or that an internal delusion triggered the attack. Others point to the possibility of drugs, though no conclusive evidence of intoxication was reported. Some have also claimed that this is a racially motivated crime. However, the police have not suggested that there is any evidence to support this. Brown himself has not given any explanation. The portrait that has emerged is of a homeless ex-convict with a violent past and untreated mental health issues. For the community, learning about Brown's history led many to become frustrated. Also, what's worth mentioning is that just days after the brutal attack, on the 2nd of September 2025, something happened that turned public outrage into disbelief. The City Council held a meeting to discuss transit safety in light of the gruesome murder. However, the council paused the meeting to eat cake and even posted about it online. So, a reportedly somber meeting about a refugee's brutal death was interrupted by a birthday cake break. A photograph was then posted on Twitter of the cake with a caption saying, "Here's the cake," followed by, "Cake time is over. Charlotte City Council is now starting its discussion of the fatal stabbing." Social media erupted. Many people found this to be unbelievably strange and rather tone-deaf. How was a man with a criminal past and schizophrenia so freely allowed to walk around? How and why did the system fail to intervene before he did something this horrific? These questions are currently fueling much of the public discourse. On the night of the murder, DeCarlos Brown Jr. was swiftly arrested at the scene. He was initially taken to the Atrium Health Hospital for treatment for the minor injuries he sustained to his hand. The police guarded him at the hospital, and as soon as the doctors cleared his release, Brown was formally charged with first-degree murder. The police publicly announced the arrest the following day and identified Irina as the victim. Within a week, the legal proceedings were in motion. On the 29th of August 2025, after Brown's release from the hospital, he was booked into the Mecklenburg County Jail on the murder charge. A judge ordered that Brown be held without bond, meaning that he would remain in custody until trial. In North Carolina, first-degree murder is a capital felony, and while it's too early for prosecutors to announce if they're seeking the death penalty, the default expectation is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole if he is convicted. As evidence of the crime solidified, with surveillance video, eyewitness testimony, forensic evidence, and the knife, a grand jury took up the case, and pretty soon it was reported that Brown had been indicted for first-degree murder by this jury. One early focus on the leading proceedings was, of course, Brown's mental state. As mentioned, he had a history of mental illness, and this quickly came into play. A judge ordered that Brown undergo a competency evaluation, which is a formal assessment by a psychiatrist to determine if he is mentally fit to stand trial. Being competent to stand trial means the defendant understands the charges and can assist in their defense. Given Brown's strange behavior before the crime and the unresolved jury evaluation from his prior case, the court wanted to ensure that he could participate in the murder trial. Depending on the results, if he were found to be incompetent, he could be sent to a state hospital for treatment until competency is restored. This whole process could delay the trial for months or even longer. For now, Brown has secured legal representation. His defense will have to decide whether to mount an insanity defense or to negotiate a plea. But given the brutality and the notoriety of the case, any outcome short of a trial and serious punishment seems unlikely. It is possible that Brown's attorney might negotiate for him to plead guilty or not guilty by reason of insanity, in exchange for a guaranteed life sentence, taking the death penalty off the table. This would mean that he would spend the rest of his life in a secure psychiatric facility, but as of now, no plea agreements have been announced. The news of Irina's murder sent shockwaves through both the local Charlotte community and far beyond. Donations poured into a GoFundMe, which was set up by friends to assist her family with funeral costs and perhaps to transport her body back to Ukraine if that's what the family wants. This will be extremely expensive. A link to the GoFundMe will be pinned in the comments and in the description. The general opinion from people who have seen the footage is that of pure anger and rage. Many want revenge and retribution for this twisted crime. To see an innocent woman just sat there minding her own business, murdered in such a cruel, overkill way, is truly hard to stomach. The footage is harrowing. Online commenters are calling for Brown's death, saying that this is exactly the kind of case that the death penalty was made for. And for these people, anything short of Brown being put to death would be seen as a great injustice for Irina and her family. The case of Irina is one that even I found hard to stomach. To see such a senseless murder unfold on camera is nothing short of horrific. Many have also pointed out the morbid irony. She was supposed to be entering a hopeful new chapter. She was able to escape the indiscriminate brutality of war, only to be killed in a country where she sought safety. As always, people are now talking about better mental health intervention, helping to prevent such cases from occurring over and over and over again. Tragically, things never really seem to change. The family now just want people to remember Irina not just as a victim, but as a person. They want people to know who she was, a talented artist, a loving family member, and a resilient soul who had weathered one of the worst situations possible: war.